if you're serious about this, I would ask you to acquire my company. I was 18 years old. I was the youngest employee at VaynerMedia. VaynerMedia had 1,000 employees, $10,000 on a new type of ad just to see if we could get some traction with it.
Out of all of these people who say that they want to be high performing and build high performing businesses and have high performing talent, very, very few get to actually do it and be successful at it.
Randomly, I'm pulled into a conference room at the office, and every senior leadership member at the company walks in.
Running the business and building the agency business exposed you to your own flaws.
And I did that for about 3.5 years until I exited the company to one of my first clients. That falling out became kind of a public thing. I feel a little bad about it today.
At what point it's a good idea to start thinking about launching the second venture?
We're creating internal tools first, which is just making the agency business better. And then once those tools are good enough, we can package them as their own product.
Right. So today I'm thrilled to be joined by Calvin Hamilton, a true force in the world of content marketing and personal branding. At just 25 years old, Calvin already accomplished what many can dream of. He built and sold his marketing agency, Engineer Influence, to Serhant after working closely with some of the biggest names like Gary Vee and, of course, Ryan Serhant himself. Now he's back to his entrepreneurial roots, building two exciting ventures, right? Engine.fm and Reason.io, your consulting business. So yeah, welcome to the episodes, Calvin.
Thank you for having me on.
Perhaps, Mickey, we could just start with the time when you just entered the world of marketing and content marketing space. Your journey started with video content on YouTube. Curious, how did sort of the early experiences shape your understanding of content creation and marketing?
Good question. So I, as you mentioned, started my career on YouTube really kind of accidentally in many ways. The way that this came about was when I was young, I really loved playing video games, specifically first-person shooters, more specifically Call of Duty. And when I was in like middle school, I found out that people were recording their video game gameplay and uploading it to this weird, quirky site called YouTube. And YouTube was not the behemoth that it is today. This was pre-Google acquisition. And I thought this was really cool. I loved playing video games and I loved watching other people that were particularly good upload their best moments and their montages. So I decided to save up my allowance money and buy this little box, a device called a Hauppauge HD PVR that you could plug into your TV so that it would record whatever was on your TV to your laptop. And I started making my own gaming YouTube videos. That then got me into editing YouTube videos and learning Adobe After Effects, which was kind of like the status quo or the best video editor for montages and stuff on YouTube at the time. I also then learned Adobe Photoshop, which I used to make better thumbnails and channel art and all of this stuff and so on and so forth. And really, truly, this process, while accidental, gave me a fantastic foundation into social media content creation and social media best practices because I learned about YouTube thumbnail strategy. I learned that you had to make enticing video titles that people were willing to click on. I learned that you had to make the first few seconds of your YouTube video interesting to hook the viewer and to keep them watching, right? There were all of these little things that weren't given to me in lessons, but I ended up learning through practice and iteration and in trying to make the best videos possible that have stayed true to this day. And I'd say that it was a great foundation, especially because I didn't try to learn it. I just did through experimentation. And so it really stuck with me and it resonated and I got a lot of practice in. But YouTube and gaming content was undeniably the way that I learned, I'd say, a lot of the foundational skills that have gone into my understanding of social media and content creation and even personal branding today.
You just said that experimentation, I assume, was the key to your success with YouTube. Is that something that you also transferred as a skill to your career to further, all of your ventures and obviously working with Gary and Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm constantly testing new things.
Mm.
I think that one of your obligations as an entrepreneur or as a marketer is to be curious and to constantly try things and to be willing to fail and to know that everything you try isn't going to work,
Mm.
but occasionally something will, and it makes up for all of the times that things didn't work. So, as a marketer, what that looks like is trying new content formats to see what resonates with the audience. And 10 of them are going to flop and not do super well, but then one of them is going to crush. And that's where you're going to get 10 leads from. And that makes up for the 10 that didn't work. And then as an entrepreneur, this can be a new service offering. This can be a different way of fulfilling your existing client service. This can be a different way of communicating to your clients, trying new hires, whatever the case is. And being curious and experimenting is, or rather, experimenting is one of the best ways to get those learnings quickly, I would say. So that is something that has absolutely stayed consistent throughout my life ever since I was very young. And it really all stems from curiosity. It's not a very, I think it's become more
Mm.
strategic, but it hasn't always been a very strategic approach. It's more so just been like, hey, let's see what happens when we do this. We throw it at the wall, and
Yeah.
if it sticks, great, cool. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. I guess curiosity is the sort of the foundation of experimentation, right? You have to be genuinely curious about the thing that you're learning about. Otherwise, you're kind of trying to force yourself into some sort of experimentation. No, it's a framework or principle. I totally agree with you. Now, what's happened after YouTube? Can you kind of walk us through sort of your career, maybe?
So YouTube was a massive piece of my early career because I started making YouTube videos when I was like 11 years old,
Mm.
when I saved up my allowance money and I bought that Hauppauge HD PVR. And after a couple of years through having made a ton of videos, I ended up getting a couple of like very small gigs editing YouTube videos for other people. It would be like 25 bucks here, 10 bucks there, a couple of bucks there. And around that same time, I found out that people were actually monetizing their YouTube videos. So they were able to run ads and do brand deals on their content to make money, which, as 13, 14-year-old Calvin, was the most captivating thing in the world because I loved video games and I loved this process of making content. So the idea that you could actually just make content and get paid for it, to me, was fascinating. I thought that was the coolest thing. So I learned about this industry called the multi-channel network industry, which partnered with gaming YouTubers to help them monetize their content using YouTube's ads platform. And it was through that I ended up landing like remote free internship for this tiny startup in London called Content Pixel. And Karen, who's the former CEO and founder of Content Pixel, basically let me do a couple of like small administrative tasks as well as some content scouting. So finding other creators to bring into the network and to work with. And it was through that I learned kind of about the business of YouTube. And that led to a few more gigs and jobs at these other MCNs on the YouTube platform, ranging from Broadband TV to Voss to Freedom. I eventually tried to start my own YouTube network, which I did for, I want to say, like a year or so. It wasn't anything
Nice.
crazy formal or official,
Mm.
but I did that when I was in high school. And it started to pick up a little bit of steam around my junior year of high school. And I ended up having this huge falling out with the management company that I was doing this with, or that I was kind of working under, because it was a sub network. It wasn't my own company necessarily. I had a technology partner that I had to rely on for the infrastructure for the
Right.
business. And that falling out became kind of a public thing. I feel a little bad about it today, but I was 16 years old. And essentially, what had happened was our dashboard that we provided to our clients that reported their earnings had a glitch in it. And the glitch was the responsibility of our technical partner, right? The one that was actually providing the technology that I had this agreement with. But the glitch misreported client earnings, which is a big problem, as you can imagine. And effectively would take whatever your current month's earnings were and it would add it to the previous month. And then that's what it would display as your earnings. So they would be significantly higher than they should have been, almost two times the amount. which caused clients, not necessarily my clients, luckily, because we were able to get to the bottom of it pretty quickly, but the clients at other networks with the same technology partner to freak out. And I turned around and I said, hey, I'm going to release all of my clients from my company because I don't really stand by what's going on with the technology partner. I did that. That made somebody very upset, as you can possibly imagine. And another MCN called Scale Lab, which was the seventh largest YouTube multi-channel network at the time, based in Santa Monica, California, reached out to me and they said, hey, we saw what you did. We really appreciate that. We think we need more people like you at the company. And so they offered me a remote job while I was in high school working for them, which was cool. I did that for about a year and a half. And by the time that I graduated high school, which was on June 8th, 2017, when I was 18 years old, it was literally my 18th birthday. Scale Lab, a couple of weeks later, had offered me a job to move to Santa Monica, California, to work for them full time instead of going to university. They offered me $40,000 a year to work at the Scale Lab office. I looked at it and I really thought about it because I didn't want to go to university. I wasn't super big on school, but I also didn't have a reason not to go to university. And they had kind of presented me with that opportunity to say, hey, if you don't want to go to school, here's an option. But I didn't feel very bullish about the future of the MCN industry, which I think, looking back especially, was a good feeling to have had, because the MCN industry did not do very well from there. And in addition, I didn't think that I would learn a whole lot staying in the same industry that I had already been working in throughout all of high school. So I respectfully declined their invitation to work for them in Santa Monica, and I continued to work for them in the part-time remote capacity that I had been throughout high school. And it was a couple of weeks later that, by some splash of serendipity, Gary Vee, or Gary Vaynerchuk, tweeted on Twitter saying, hey, I'm looking for help with my YouTube channel. Please email me. But he didn't include his email in the tweet. So I kind of looked at it and I thought, that would be cool, but there's no way that Gary would ever consider hiring an 18-year-old that hadn't gone to university. So I didn't think much of it. However, a couple of hours later, I opened up Instagram, I looked at Gary's stories, and he screenshotted his tweet and he labeled his email on top of it with like the in-app text on Instagram stories. And I kind of thought about it for a second and I just said, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to shoot my shot. Let's just see what happens. So I sent Gary a cold email and I said, hey, Gary, my name's Calvin Hamilton. I'm a huge fan and I would love to become your YouTube channel manager. And then in the second line of the email in bold font, I wrote, I know my shit, : and then the paragraph thereunder explained that I had been working on the YouTube platform throughout all of high school. I had been working with these multi-channel networks, a bunch of large creators. I've helped with brand deals. And then I ended the email by saying, look, I'm 18 years old. I didn't go to college, but if you give me this opportunity, I will work so unbelievably hard for you, like I have in the past. And Gary emailed me back the next day, connecting me with a couple of people on his team. And that led to 3 rounds of phone interviews, followed by actually getting the job offer. So once I got that offer, I sat down with my parents at the dinner table, where my mom basically gave me the ultimatum. She said, hey, if you go to New York City and you take this job, you're completely on your own. You got to figure it out. But if you go to college, we'll pay for everything. We'll pay your tuition, we'll pay your room, we'll pay your board, all of it's taken care of. And I didn't have to take out loans. So it was a very generous offer, which was effectively my parents' way of saying, if you do what we want you to do, then we'll pay for it. But if you do what you want to do, then you got to figure it out. And I said, okay. So I packed my bags and moved to New York, where I was paid $30,000 a year to move to New York City. So just for context here, I declined a job for $40,000 a year in Santa Monica, which is less expensive as far as cost of living is concerned, and then taken a job for 25% less in a more expensive city, which did not go super far, but I thought that the opportunity was worth it. And I think that panned out pretty well. And so from there, I was working at VaynerMedia. I don't know if you want me to continue down this stream of thought. But
it's fascinating. What I wanted to ask you that, by the way, how old were you at the time?
I was 18.
18. How did you rationalize the choice? Obviously, working for Gary Vee is amazing, but how did you rationalize the choice between, I'm going to take the high paying job that's got probably a little bit more certainty, versus moving to a completely new city, given it's New York, right, and taking a considerably less of a pay? How did you rationalize it? Were you thinking about it too much? It was like, or you were like, you really wanted to make it happen. It was like, this is what you already sort of chose, and maybe unconsciously.
So I think that there are three things to take into consideration here. First and foremost, I didn't want to go to university. So I already had some form of opposition or distaste for that idea in my head, which prevented me from wanting to choose university as an option. Secondly, the idea of moving to New York, which is, for all intents and purposes, one of the greatest cities in the world, which is the hub of business in many ways, seemed really exciting to me. And then thirdly, I was a big fan of Gary. I really liked what he talked about in his content. I really resonated with the message he was giving his audience. And so the idea of working for him was really appealing.
Mm,
So those three things together, you know, a distaste for university, a desire to live in a big city like New York that is the hub of business, in the world, and working for somebody that I really align myself with in certain kind of core values was what ultimately pushed me to pursue that opportunity. So it wasn't a very hard decision, is the easiest way to put it. For
yeah.
me, as soon as the opportunity presented itself, it was like, yep, that's what I'm doing.
Mm,
But I at least needed to present it to my parents
mm,
to make it seem like it was a real thought and that I would
yeah.
consider what they had to say. Had my mom come back and said, absolutely do not take that job, you have to go to university, I probably would have ended up going to university just out of respect for my mother who did everything for me, but luckily I didn't have a parent that was that demanding, and she recognized that this was my decision to make, and she gave me a choice, and she provided incentives for me to do the thing
Mm.
that she wanted me to do. And I honestly think that was probably the best way to approach that as far as parenting decisions go as she possibly could have. So no, for me it was a pretty easy decision.
It's incredible how much influence parents have at this stage of person's development and influence on their choice
Hmm.
in life and in career. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So okay, moving fast forward, you're working for Gary Vee. What you've learned from Gary Vee or working with his team that potentially stood out the most to you?
I'd say that there are a couple of things. The obvious one that comes first is that Gary's team was the hardest working team at VaynerMedia. So, for context here, a lot of people might confuse this by saying Gary's team with VaynerMedia, the ad agency. VaynerMedia is the company, and VaynerMedia as a company has about 1,000 employees. However, Gary's team, which is called Team Gary Vee, has about 30 employees. So, it's
Mm,
a large team within the organization. And at VaynerMedia, if you work at the normal company, at the ad agency that works with the Fortune 500 clients, you kind of clock into work around 9 in the morning. You take an hour for lunch around noon, and then you leave the office around 6. That's the normal work day. But if you work on Team Gary Vee, you probably show up around 7:30 or 8 in the morning, and then you leave around 7:30 or 8 at night, because the expectations when you're working directly for the CEO are significantly higher. So Team Gary Vee, as people, they were very hardworking individuals that were very serious about the pursuit of excellence and making sure that we were the best at our craft, which was building a personal brand and social media content. So that would be kind of number one. Number two coincides with this, which is there was constant experimentation. Everybody was always trying to test new things to see what worked and what didn't work. And they weren't afraid to spend hours on a new edit or $10,000 on a new type of ad just to see if we could get some traction with it. Now, we wouldn't actually spend $10,000 on an experiment. We would if it worked, but not, just on a whim. But we were constantly trying new things. And so subsequently, that taught me a lot about learning and the fastest ways to learn, which are generally one of two things. You either try things for yourself or you watch what other people are trying, right? Pay attention to other people that run good experiments and see what their results are, and then copy anything that works, and then continue to try stuff yourself. And that was kind of our methodology across the board. So I'd say that those were probably the two biggest things that I had learned. One more that I can add is just around people management. Gary is a very empathetic leader. I have nothing but good things to say about Gary. And the way that he interacted with his employees and just people on the street, Gary is the same off of camera as he is on camera. The level of respect and kindness and gratitude that he expresses on camera is exactly what you get off of camera. Simultaneously, the amount that he curses on
Hmm.
camera is the amount that he curses off of camera, right? None of it changes. And that is one of the things that I love about him the most, is that he really is who he says he is. And his authenticity with his online presence and his brand is exactly what you should expect to get from him in person. So the TLDR here is that the way that he manages people and the way that he communicates how you should manage people is exactly what he does, which is to lead with kindness and empathy, but to also make quick decisions. And that if somebody sucks, you should go ahead and fire them.
Hmm. You said something interesting about the culture of experimentation and how it works. We work with predominantly marketing agencies as a consultancy. And I repeatedly hear from high performing entrepreneurs and high performing founders that this is what they want to embed in their business and their culture. And not just in the agency space, I guess, across so many industries. You meet founders, and then there is a specific founder, they truly want to uphold like a specific a high standard of performance and delivery. But
Mhm.
in my experience, out of all of these people who say that they want to be high performing and build high performing businesses and have high performing talents, very, very few get to actually do it and be successful at it. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously you've got the context and experience plus building your own business and agencies. What are your thoughts on why is it, maybe there are some secret components that most people don't know about that have to take or have to be in place in order for high performance to be the reality.
Okay. So this is a great question that requires a relatively multifaceted answer.
Hmm.
So, first and foremost, how do you attract top talent to work for you and for your company? You present them with an opportunity that looks like the best. If somebody is truly the best at what they do and they are considered top talent, let's say that they're the top 10% of their category. They're a top 10% marketer, content creator, maybe they're a top 10% copywriter. They're just that good, they're detail oriented, they're a great employee, they communicate frequently, all these things. You need to present them with an offer that would be attractive to somebody that is very valuable in the workplace. And so, what that means is, generally speaking, for most employers, it has to be relatively significant monetarily. You have to offer a decent amount of money that makes sense for them to be interested in. And then, secondly, culturally, it has to make sense for them. If you say, hey, we're going to offer little pay and you're going to be working 12 hours a day, you're probably going to get a no, right? It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. If you say, hey, we're going to offer a lot of pay and you'll work 12 hours a day, there's a lot of people that will still say yes to that because the pay makes up for the amount of work. If you say, hey, we're going to offer a lot of pay and you only have to work 8 hours a day, there's going to be even more people that are going to say yes to that because they are happy to have the extra free time off. If you say even less time, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea there. The
Hmm.
offer has to make sense. So that's a kind of a prerequisite in some capacity. Now, you could come back and you can say, well, Calvin, when you got a job working for Gary, you were working a ton of hours and he paid you very little. Good point. However, working for Gary as an opportunity is something that can't be measured monetarily. And so, what I mean by that is that there is a third lever here that is very hard to influence, which is, what is the opportunity of working for you and why is that significant? And so the ways that you can influence this are, if you have a very fast growing company, for example, and you're offering stock options, or there's very clear ways in which somebody can be promoted and become a senior executive within the company that you're running, That as an opportunity makes a lot more sense. For me, the opportunity was being able to say that I worked for Gary Vaynerchuk and to learn all the things that I learned. And that was immensely more valuable than any amount of money would have been that was, reasonable to get for that type of role. Like the max compensation my job would have paid back in 2017 for the work that I was doing, social media management and stuff, is probably like in New York City, 90,000 a year on the high end. That probably would be about what I
Mm,
would expect. I would have taken that $30,000 a year job every single time presented with the two opportunities to earn 90 versus earn 30, but I'm working for Gary because the opportunity was that much more valuable. So, what can you do to make the opportunity of working for you more valuable compared to somebody that offers more money and even less time working? Having a great personal brand is one way of doing it. If you have a identifiable, unique personal brand that people are familiar with, that's a really, really good way of impacting how fruitful it is to work for you.
mm,
Again, most people in entrepreneurship or in marketing know who Gary Vee is. So when I say I worked for Gary Vee, that means something to them and they're interested in that. There's a lot of leverage that comes with that. Now, are you going to become the next Gary Vee? Probably not, right? That's a very competitive space to try to win. But if you can just become somebody within the industry that a lot of people are familiar with, right? If all of a sudden I become the best personal branding expert, that everybody within the personal branding industry knows of, that becomes pretty interesting where anybody that works for me can say that I worked with the guy who's like the expert in that space. So having a good personal brand certainly influences that. The second thing is being able to clearly articulate what the opportunity of working at your company is. So how fast is the company growing and what are the opportunities to be promoted and to become a more significant piece of that company or a more significant person within the organization? If you can't answer that, that's difficult because it means that why would somebody work for you when there are other companies that are growing faster? And if you can't pay top compensation, then why would somebody work for you when there are organizations that will? So it's a pretty binary thing as far as how you attract these people and how you keep them. It's just hard. It's hard to offer top of market compensation because that means that you have to take that money out of your own pocket,
yep,
presumably. It's hard to offer, less time working because especially when you're paying a lot, you want as much as possible to come out of it. It's hard to, influence your company to make it grow faster because it requires a lot of work and strategic thinking. It's hard to build your personal brand. Like all of these things are going to be hard, but it's pretty straightforward. It's hard but simple, if that
yep,
makes sense. And so that's really kind of the equation. Now, one thing that I will add here, just to finalize this thought, is that I fully recognize that I have just said that you need to pay a lot of money and try not to get people to overwork and to be famous and to have a fast growing company. And people might hear that and they'd be like, dude, what the hell? Like, I have no shot, right? Because I'm not famous. I don't have a lot of money. I need a ton of work to be done. Da da
yep,
da da da. What I strongly, strongly suggest is don't look at your local labor market. If I try to hire people within the US for any marketing role, I'm effectively going to offer a minimum for like an entry level position, minimum of around $40,000 or $50,000 a year. That's a lot of money, all things considered. If I go to South America or Southeast Asia, whether that's India or Sri Lanka or the Philippines, and I offer half what I'm willing to pay in the US market. So let's say instead of $40,000 a year, I'm willing to pay 20,000 a year, or instead of 50, 25, you will get an employee that is the top of their market. They will have 10 years of experience. They will have done this with companies that look just like you. They will speak great English. They will have a great portfolio or CV, whatever it is that you're looking for, and they will be exactly what you would otherwise want in your local market. So pay attention to labor arbitrage opportunities. Look at the global market, not just your local market. It's certainly ideal to have employees that are there with you in person that you can interact with and stuff. But sometimes you're just too early to afford that. And the beautiful thing about the internet is that we've democratized opportunity. So you can hire somebody to help with marketing efforts in Sri Lanka that you otherwise would have had somebody in London doing for you. But the beautiful thing is that you can pay the person in Sri Lanka half, but to them, it's a
yep.
ton of money, and you presented them with the best opportunity in the world. So they're thrilled and they're going to stay with you forever.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on all the points. I think what a lot of the SME agencies and just generally speaking, businesses do not understand is what other levers can they create for themselves to attract
Mhm.
better talent. I
Mhm.
think a lot of the overwhelming majority of founders, including agency owners, limit their opportunities when it comes to recruitment, and they don't think of the agency business is first and foremost as a recruitment business, because fundamentally it's down to people and
Talent.
talents and processes, but talent makes the processes. So fundamentally, it's people. So totally agree with you on that one. And actually, I'm meant to ask you, what would you advise to, let's say, $1 million agencies, who've got the growth and resource dilemma all the time at that sort of stage of growth in terms of recruitment? But you already answered that. Moving forward, Gary Vee working for them, then making the decision to leave VaynerMedia. What was your thinking about the next steps? How did you go about it?
So I worked for VaynerMedia from September 2017 to March 2019. And ultimately, the only reason that I decided to leave was because I felt like I hit a ceiling where I wasn't learning as much. After about a year of working at VaynerMedia, I felt like I had learned a ton. I learned paid ads, I learned a bunch of social media strategies, I learned kind of the ins and outs of parts of the agency business and how they were interacting with clients, putting together proposals, pitching clients, what client meetings actually looked like. There was a ton that I was exposed to, and it was super helpful, informative. However, after about a year, I realized that that started to slow down. And then after another few months, it really started to slow down. And it kind of just became repetition, where I was doing things that I already knew how to do and I wasn't learning as much. Don't get me wrong, you still learn plenty of things and you become even better at what it is that you're trying to do. But I wasn't learning many new concepts. So what I realized is that the opportunity of working for Gary, for me, it certainly wasn't financial because there wasn't a whole lot of financial upside. But what there was being able to say that I worked for Gary and being able to learn a ton of new things. Once you took away the learning component from this, really the last lever was being able to say that I worked for Gary. But I already had over a year under my belt of working for Gary and this huge portfolio of work that I could point to and say, this is all the stuff that I did for him. So that lever was not nearly as strong as it once was. Now, you could look at the traditional levers of, okay, what about opportunities for promotion? If you just stay there for longer, could you get promoted within the organization? It's like, for sure, but that just didn't sound very exciting to me. Going from a social media analyst to social media manager to maybe head of content to then a
Mm.
brand director to then, yeah, it just, that didn't really sound that interesting because ultimately it was just a fancier title to explain exactly what it was that I was already doing, but maybe I just had more people under me. And so I wasn't really thrilled about the idea,
Mm.
is the best way I can put it. So none of this was a dig at VaynerMedia or a dig at Gary. I loved VaynerMedia and I loved Gary. It was a ton of work, but I have nothing but but sincere gratitude and appreciation for them and for the opportunity that they gave me. So deciding to leave was really a couple of things. I thought I could make more money running an agency myself.
Mm.
I also thought that I would learn a lot more if I started my own business because that's what I was really interested in, was trying to start a business. And I figured that the best way to do that is actually by leaving and starting a business, not doing a little bit of consulting on the weekends when I can find the time. So ultimately, I had a conversation with Gary where I told him, hey, I'm thinking about leaving to start an agency and I want to know what you think. And he, I can't even begin to articulate just how much I appreciate what he did next. But he said, if there's anywhere else in VaynerMedia that you're interested in, if it's the strategy department, if it's the paid media department, if there's anything that you're interested in, we'll happily move you to that team or to that department so that you can continue to be in our ecosystem because I really want to have you here. However, if you're dead set on starting an agency and for some reason it doesn't work out, and I really hope that it does work out, but if for some reason it doesn't work out, you always have a place back here on Team Gary Vee. And that
Mm.
was the perfect send off for 19-year-old Calvin before deciding to leave what had become this safe, comfortable job to do something that was risky and not safe. So I left in March 2019, started an agency that went on to be known as Engineer Influence. And that process was really interesting. I learned a ton, right? I look back at the early agency days that I had, and you think that you're an idiot when you look back at it, but because so many things are so obvious to you now. But that's exactly how I know that I've learned so much. But I really learned how to start, build, and grow a business in many ways. I started as effectively a glorified freelancer where I
Yeah,
was doing all of the work,
like
and
all of us.
I exactly. And you're doing the fulfillment of service yourself. Maybe you outsource a couple of tasks every here and there, but eventually I got to a place where I actually hired people. And like I mentioned before, I hired people internationally because that's all that I could afford, until time went on. And then eventually I actually had US based employees and all of these things. And it was really cool. And I did that for about 3.5 years until I exited the company to one of my first clients, who was Ryan Serhant. Now, the way that I got Ryan Serhant as a client was very serendipitous because I happened to meet a guy who became his videographer at a dinner party. So, in other words, I was invited to a dinner party in the East Village in New York City. And while there, I met a ton of people, but one of these guys was named Adrian Vasquez. Adrian and I hit it off well. At the time, he was a freelance videographer in New York. Another guy at this dinner party was named Adam Hamway, and he was Ryan Serhant's videographer. I didn't know who Ryan Serhant was. And so I didn't really engage a whole lot with Adam, but I really hit it off with this Adrian guy. Over the coming months, Adrian and I became very close friends, and Adrian got a job as Ryan's second videographer through Adam
Mm,
Hamway, who he also met at that party. As time went on, Adam ended up leaving working for Ryan. And so Adrian became the main videographer and kind of creative director for Ryan's brand on social media. And after a few months, Adrian texted me and said, "Hey, my boss needs help running ads on social media. I know that you do that for Gary." This is while I was working at VaynerMedia. "Is there any way you could help us?" And I said, "Sure." And to me, this was just a favor to my friend. I knew that his boss was looking for this thing, so I was happy to help my friend so that he could make his boss happy. And that was fine by me. I didn't know who Ryan was. I didn't really care. Ryan wasn't paying me. It was just an opportunity to help my friend. After a few months of running ads for Ryan for free, we were getting some killer results. Like, it looked really, really good. And at this point, I had left VaynerMedia and I was starting my own agency. So my focus was less on helping my friend's boss as
yeah.
it was on getting paying clients for myself that I could actually use to pay the bills and grow the business. So I stopped replying to Ryan's texts as time went on until finally he texted me one day and he goes, "Dude, what do I need to do to work with you? We want to continue this relationship." So I sent him a contract and an invoice. He signed it, and that's how I got him as a client. We worked together for about 2 years. At that time, COVID hit. So
So
around
just to
early,
just to clarify,
yeah,
you did work for free for Ryan
for like 5 months.
for like 5 months.
And mind
Yeah,
you, this is after I had already had the experience of having worked for Gary. Like, I didn't
right,
really have a whole lot to prove.
right,
I had already proven it
yeah.
before, and so yeah, no, I was still working
So
for free.
you were still working for free. You delivered the results, and he was impressed, and then he was like, he couldn't let you go, basically.
Yeah, but like, I hate to toot my own horn. Like, we got some kick-ass results.
Yeah,
I still think to this day it's probably my best case study.
yeah. I read in some ways that you took him from, I don't know, like not zero, but like some following on Instagram to 700,000 followers. Is that the case?
So there were a couple of things that we did together. I launched his YouTube channel with
Right.
him and his team, and so now his YouTube channel is a little over 1 million subscribers. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I was filming the content.
Yeah.
That's why he had a videographer. So I'm not going to act like I was editing the content. He had those people, but I would help with anything from title strategy and thumbnails to what content should be filmed and how it should be posted and so on and so forth. And like, when Ryan uploaded his most viewed YouTube video ever, I was sitting there with Adrian and the team working on the title and thumbnail strategy for that
Mm,
video. And so that's what we did on that front. Second to this, I helped with ads. And so the ads were predominantly the majority of the free work. And so Ryan, when we began working together, had like 850,000 followers on Instagram. He was not the most followed real estate agent in the world. Instead, it was this guy named Frederick Uckland, who was on the same TV show as Ryan. That really bothered Ryan. So
yeah.
Ryan wanted to beat Frederick Uckland and become the most followed real estate agent in the world. As Ryan's YouTube channel started doing better and better, I helped them with an ad strategy on Instagram where we were able to get new followers on Instagram for pennies. And when I say pennies, like 6 cents a piece, 10 cents a piece, depending on the market that we were targeting. We grew Ryan's Instagram from about 850,000 followers to 1.5 million followers in like a year. It was not a whole lot of time, and we were not spending that much money. It was like a few $1,000s a month, but it wasn't nearly as much as you would otherwise expect to grow that much that quickly. Simultaneously, Ryan's YouTube channel continued to grow and grow and grow. So we saw such massive growth in Ryan's brand during that time that was really kind of the main case study was doubling his followers on Instagram, essentially taking YouTube channel from 0 to over 1 million subscribers, and so on and so forth. After about 2 years of working together, though, COVID hit, real estate market tanks. Ryan decides to leave his real estate brokerage Nest Seekers and start a new company called Serhant, which is just his last name.
Yeah.
And in the process of doing so, he wanted to take marketing in-house, plus he needed to cut costs, so we stopped working together. After about another year and a half, we didn't really talk a whole lot during that time, but he texted me one day and he says, "Hey, you should come by the office sometime." At the time, I was living downtown in Soho, and Ryan's office was right there on West Broadway in Broome. I hadn't seen the new office yet, so I took him up on it. I show up at the office, and randomly I'm pulled into a conference room at the office, and every senior leadership member at the company walks in. In walks the CFO and the executive director of operations and the head of studios and the creative director and the VP of marketing. And I'm thinking, like, what the hell is going on? Like, I thought I was just here to meet my client, right? Or my former client. And Ryan eventually walks in after a few minutes, and I've shaken everybody's hand. And he basically sits down and begins to explain, "Hey, we have a ton of these problems at the company as marketing is related that we're trying to solve. First and foremost, being that we're not growing anymore. When we worked together on Ryan's content and his social, we got him to 1.5 million. 2 years later, essentially, he's still at 1.5 million on Instagram. His YouTube growth has slowed down quite a bit, and across the board, they're just not seeing nearly as much as they were. So after like an hour of chatting about this, he says, "We don't really want to hire an agency, but we think you're the right person for this job. So how can we make this happen?" And I kind of shrugged my shoulders and I'm like, "Look, I'm humbled by the fact that you guys have invited me here, but I don't think this is something I want to do right now. I'm really excited about what I have going on with the company. And so, I'll let you know if I can think of anybody that I think would be good for this." And that was that. We shook hands and I left. I had a call with one of my advisors after that. And she's a former vice president at VaynerMedia. She was one of the advisors at my agency, just helping give me insights on things. And she basically said, it's very uncommon that a client would do something like that, let alone with their senior leadership team, let alone for an entire hour out of a day in the middle of the week just to meet with you to see if there's an opportunity to work together. Maybe there's something there. You should explore that a bit further. We didn't really know what. She didn't know what direction that would move in, but she just said, you should explore it a bit further. So I then had a call with my dad, and my dad says kind of the same thing. And he explains, you should go write him a letter, get like some nice stationery and sit down and write a letter to Ryan. So I went to Goods for the Study, which is the stationery store in New York, and I bought some nice letterhead and I wrote Ryan a letter and I said, "Hi, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time the other day. It was great to meet you and the team. I think I would be remiss not to explore this a little bit further. So why don't we set up a follow-up conversation?" So Ryan gets my letter. He texts me, "Nice handwriting." I said, "Thanks." And then we set up that follow-up meeting for the next week. And during that meeting, we spent 45 minutes this time, just basically chatting about all the same things. The one difference, however, is that at the end of the meeting, Ryan goes, "I'm putting the ball in your court. I need you to tell me what you need to make this happen." And that was that. We shook hands. I walked out the door. 2 days later, early in the morning on like a Saturday, I sat down to write probably the longest email I've ever written, where I said, "Look, if you're serious about this, I would ask you to acquire my company. Here's what we're doing right now." I gave him all the numbers, our revenue, our profits, how many employees we have, the types of clients we're working with. I said, "This is what I would be asking for." And I also outlined like what I would ask for in moving to Serhant.
How did you decide that was the right move? How did you, were you really thinking about that as like you wanted to sell the company, or did you advise with anyone? Like, how did you come up with this idea in the first place?
So there are a couple of things at play here. First and foremost, they made it clear that they didn't want to hire an agency. So I kind of figured that that's probably off the table. Secondly, I didn't really want to just take a normal job. There needed to be a significant reason to be willing to take the job that they were presenting me with. Thirdly, if I'm being completely honest, I was really tired of running my agency. It was a good business, but I felt like I had kind of backed myself into a corner where I really just had like a fancy high paying job. And there were a lot of things I was trying to do to fix that, but and I was generally bullish on the future of the company, but it was going to be a ton of work. And so here I am thinking, all right, this guy said he's interested. Let's just shoot our shot, see what happens. If he's interested in this, well, now I no longer really have to take myself out of this position. I have a reason to then take this job because it's a really cool opportunity and I'd get acquired and I'd have an exit on paper and all these fun things. And so we'll just see what happens. And so that was kind of it. It wasn't more strategic than that. Plus, I
Right.
felt like I got a fair price for it. And so, there was the math and the finances of it. In any case, sent him that email. I have one of those email trackers, right, that tells you when somebody opens an email. And I swear he opened the email like 300 times that day. And I'm like, oh man, I overshot this time. Like, I hope he doesn't find this disrespectful. He texts me later that evening and he says, why don't we hop on the phone on Monday? Monday was Memorial Day, I think. This was in May of 2022. And we get on the phone and he reads the email back to me point by point. And he just goes, okay, sure, yes, okay, sure, yes, okay. There were like two things that he gave me a little bit of pushback on, but neither were that significant. And by the end of it, he said, okay, like we have a deal. We'll get the paper sent to you, all the paperwork and stuff. And
Mm.
we'll get things situated. I think it was like 3 weeks later, roughly
Mm.
speaking, that I received everything from their team. And then after getting everything signed away, it was like a month later that
Mm.
I was now at the Serhant office and I was their like director or head of social media. And that was really the full process. It's a lot less traditional than people may expect. It's not like I just built the best agency in the world and thus somebody wanted to buy it. It was very relationship oriented.
Yeah, can you disclose the numbers or not?
No,
Because I haven't found anything on the internet, so I assume that you can't.
I can tell you that 75% was kind of like a traditional cash buyout, and then 25% was held as
I know
performance based.
performance
Yeah,
based. Yeah.
exactly. No, as far as traditional numbers, I'm kind of tied up in NDAs there. I don't actually know
Yeah.
for how long, to be honest, but I'm just assuming that it's
Yeah.
in perpetuity or for some amount of time that's long.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. In that case, I've got two other questions. One,
Sure.
a more contextual question about
Okay.
your oral experience of being able to put yourself in situations where you sort of earned the chance, or maybe it was luck, maybe something else, that enabled you to work with such great entrepreneurs. But also, it it seems to me, at least personally, that maybe not by design, but it seems like you've been able to articulate your journey progress as an entrepreneur quite well in terms of maybe positioning, in terms of how you've leveraged these opportunities and the people that you worked with. Have you thought about that yourself? There's already a common thread in terms of the right people, the right timing, and the right opportunities. Is that conscious, or how do you think? What do you think about that?
So I can say a couple of things here.
Hmm.
There was an unbelievable amount of luck in my journey. The
Hmm.
fact that Gary was looking to hire a YouTube manager at the same time as I graduated high school is unbelievable luck. If this had happened a year earlier, I wouldn't have been able to take the job because I would have been in high school. If it happened a year later, I would have been in university. My parents would have already paid for, a full year of university, and I probably would have had the sunk cost fallacy of saying, "Oh my god, there's no way that I'm going to back out now because it costs so much per year." So the timing on that opportunity was unbelievable. Now, Gary didn't personally reach out to me and say, "Hey, I want you to interview for this position." No, I just saw a tweet and then I took the step and the initiative to send him a cold email and to, see if I could actually have a chance at that opportunity. And it worked. Similarly, with the opportunity for Ryan, the fact that I met a guy at a dinner party who became the videographer for Ryan Serhant, who many years later was needing more marketing support as I'm simultaneously building an agency, is unbelievably lucky. There's not a whole lot that I did to influence that aside from show up. However, when having the conversation with Ryan, it would have been very easy to leave that conversation as, you're looking to hire somebody full time. There's no way that I'm going to do that. But instead, I shot my shot. I took the
Hmm.
initiative to just go ahead and say, okay, let me give this a shot and see if it lands. So There's a combination of both. And with all of this, hard work is a prerequisite, right? I did like 5 years of work on YouTube before I
Exactly.
got the job for
Yeah.
Gary. So you can't discount that and say that I didn't have the foundation. I did multiple years of work before I sold my agency to Ryan. So, you can't discount that and say that there wasn't work done there. But there's a lot of luck involved too. But I was always ready for the luck. When the luck happened, I was prepared for it. So that's a huge piece of this. Remind me the second part of this
No,
question. I
no, I
apologize.
didn't answer the second question, but the second question was to do with your journey. I think what I've read, or I don't know what it is, where I found it, but you've mentioned, and correct me if I'm wrong, that running the business and building the agency business exposed you to your own flaws. Is it something that, am I correct? Is it something that you've said somewhere on the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah. What were these flaws in the first place, and how did you work through them?
So I think as an entrepreneur, you are forced to become obsessed with making things better. And this manifests itself in a variety of capacities. But if you have an obsession with making things better, then you will probably do very well. But in order to have that obsession, you need to be comfortable with change, which is inherently uncomfortable. Because in order to change, it means that you have to address the fact that something happening right now is not as it should be. So, more specifically, that means that you look yourself in the mirror and you say, okay, I want to get to this place in the future, and I'm not there yet. Why am I not there yet? There is a reason, and it's not that, generally speaking, you just haven't waited long enough. Because you can wait for 10 years and nothing will happen if you don't change anything. So, you do have to expose your own flaws, because I did have big goals and there was a lot that I wanted to do and there's a lot that I still want to do. And so I'm constantly auditing myself and looking at my behaviors and the things that I'm doing to determine whether or not I am the person that is deserving of the things that I want. If you want a certain type of partner in your life, a certain girlfriend or boyfriend that is loyal and trusting and intelligent and fit and treats people well, you have to embody those traits yourself. If you want certain results in business, you want to run a company that does $1 million a year in profit, well, then you have to embody the traits of a hardworking entrepreneur that's willing to think through difficult problems and solve them and hire the right team and put in the work to actually making those things happen. And so you have to become comfortable with change and exposing your own flaws and realizing that no matter how hard you work and no matter how hard you try, there are always things that you're going to be doing wrong or that you could be doing better. And so you better become obsessed with making things better. And personally, that looks like fixing your health, fitness, and diet, right? Make sure that you're sleeping enough, make sure that you're exercising every day, make sure that you're eating well, because that is the foundation for everything else. You can't operate well if you're not taking care of yourself. Make sure that your relationships are getting better. And how do you make your relationships better, both personally and professionally? You spend time with people. And when you spend time with people, you spend that time intentionally and mindfully. So you're not on your phone as you're talking to people. You're taking time out of your day to check up on people that you haven't talked to in a little while. So that's how you make those things better. How do you make your business better? You audit it. What's currently not working? What could be better? When a mistake pops up, why did it happen? How do we prevent it from happening in the future? How do we get more clients? How do we make sure that we're getting the types of clients that will actually stay with us for a long period of time? How do we make sure that there's a reason for our clients to stay with us for a long period of time? These are all questions that you have to ask yourself, because no matter what, there's always going to be an answer as to how you can make things better. And so the flaws that I found in myself, is a very long-winded way of getting there eventually, are I found that I really struggle with communication first and foremost. So what that means is I'm really bad at answering text messages and I'm really bad at answering emails. And it's solely a mindset thing. I will just get an email or a text, I'll see it, and then I kind of reply mentally in some capacity, and I know that I need to actually reply. And then a day passes, and then another day passes, and then another day passes. And before I know it, 5 days have passed, and now I'm like, I don't even know if I should reply because it's been so long. Does the person even expect a response anymore? But what I didn't realize is twofold. A, it's extremely disrespectful to operate that way, because what you're effectively doing is you're giving people the cold shoulder, whether you mean to or not. And this is still something I'm working on, for the record. But one of the things I've done to try to address this is I've hired an executive assistant, and she's actually helping me manage my inbox and help me understand what I need to reply to and who it's coming in from and what the urgency of those messages are. So that's an important one. Another thing that I've done is just taking time consistently on the calendar to sit down and do texts. Occasionally, when I say occasionally, which is like every week or two, I will sit outside and I'll have a cigar and I'll sit there for like 2 hours. And my only objective for that time is to put my journal in front of me, write down any interesting thoughts I have, and to text people that are coming to mind just to check in on them and say, hey, because that's a really nice way of building those relationships and making it clear that you care about people. So that's something that I'm trying to continuously get better at. I still kind of suck, but I'm getting better, and I'm trying to address that flaw. Another thing that I've exposed with myself for sure is shiny object syndrome as a consistent issue that has prevented me from growth in the past. I will very frequently be working on something and it's working and I'm seeing traction. And then all of a sudden I get this idea for this other thing. And it seems like, that would be such a better way of doing what it is that I'm doing now. I should just jump ship and do that instead. And ultimately, what that's ended up doing is it scattered my focus. So when I was running Engineer Influence, I tried to launch a second business called Create Content. Create Content was effectively supposed to be like a cost-effective design business. And as time went on, it was actually a really solid business. It's not like I got it to a ton of money, but we were making like $5,000 a month at one point. And it was from like this little side hustle that I had going on in addition to the agency, which was how I was making actual money. And Create Content was really captivating to me because it was a productized service. And I was like, I think I could scale this even better than what I'm doing with the agency now. And there's even a tech play here. And it was super fascinating. And I genuinely got to the point where I was like, I actually think I need to pivot from the agency, which is making all the money, to this little side thing. However, given that I ended up going through the acquisition process with Serhant, I ended up killing Create Content to then go through the acquisition. Had I just stuck with the agency throughout that 2-year period leading up to the acquisition, the agency probably would have been larger, meaning I probably would have gotten an even better acquisition, or I would have worked myself out of that corner where I felt like I had this high paying job. And I finally could have gotten to a place where I would have hired the right people because I had more time to focus on the agency. So I'd say that those are the two big ones that I've seen in myself, but you constantly have to be doing these audits on yourself to determine what your biggest flaws are. And when you're conscientious of those, at least you begin to recognize how they're manifesting themselves in your day-to-day life.
I can't begin even telling you how many agency founders start their second business, whether it's an e-commerce brand or a SaaS business or an agency arm, before they even reach $1 million in revenue. Like even then, like it's like because I made a similar mistake by starting an e-commerce brand when my agency wasn't even turning multiple six figures. I was like, maybe that is this game. Second of all,
it's so tempting to do that because the grass is always greener.
Yeah.
But if you just stay a little bit more patient and just put all of your time and energy into the thing that you're already working on, the rewards are so much better and faster than if you try to start the other thing.
And second, I love your entire philosophy, and it's not just philosophy, it's definitely, totally practical set of principles, one of them obviously auditing yourself. I've heard it somewhere, but there's a phrase that in a man's life, there are two things that mirror his inadequacy. And the first is it is a business or a career. And second is women with high standards.
So maybe this is a controversial take, and if it is, we can cut it out. But I do think that there is something very real on that second note, which is interesting. If you want a good sense of whether or not you are the type of person that deserves good things in life, look at your relationship life. And more specifically, look at the types of people that show interest in you, how many people show interest in you, and whether or not you believe that any of those people would embody the characteristics of the partner that you want to have at the end of your life, the mother of your children, the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. And this can sound harsh because I know that there are a variety of factors here. Physical attractiveness is one. Now, you can influence that by taking care of yourself, eating well, sleeping well, and exercising to get in good shape. But there are certain things like I was born with this face, and this is the face I have, and I don't plan on getting plastic surgery, so it's probably just going to stay this way for a while, right? And so I fully recognize that that's the circumstance. Some people are born 5'2", and if you're 5'2", that's a little tough as a man, for sure. That puts you in a different situation. I'm not ignorant to that. I fully recognize that that's the circumstance. However, if anybody that looks like you has been able to work themselves into a situation where they have a great relationship with the great person that you identify as being the type of person that you would eventually like to have a relationship with, that is proof that you can do it too. And the types of people that show interest in you is one of the best ways to determine kind of where you currently sit in the social hierarchy. And again, that might be harsh because nobody wants to compare themselves to others and think of themselves in the social hierarchy, especially if it means that you're low in the social hierarchy, right? Good piece of context here. When I was working for Gary at 18, I was 18 years old. I was the youngest employee at VaynerMedia. VaynerMedia had 1,000 employees. I didn't have a social life because the only people that I knew in New York City were people that I was meeting through work because all I was ever doing was working. And so subsequently, what ended up happening is that outside of the office, I didn't know anybody because everybody would go out to bars and to restaurants and they'd get drinks. I was too young to do these things in the States. So I couldn't actually go out and do the same things that my coworkers were doing. And so subsequently, in the social hierarchy, for reasons that were effectively completely out of my control, I was very low, right? I was too young. And I couldn't really influence how old I am. I just had to wait, which that sucks. That's not very good advice. Now, I did download dating apps and try to meet people that way. But generally speaking, people also aren't very interested in somebody that's working crazy hours and that makes no money. So there's another thing to take into consideration. And so it is a really, really good way of getting an understanding of just where you sit in life. And this can be a very constructive way of auditing yourself, but it can also be way too negative. And so you do need to be extremely careful as you go down this rabbit hole, because what you're not trying to do is butcher your self-confidence. You're not trying to say that the partner that you have now isn't worthy of you and that you can find someone better. It's not that at all. It is just to say that if you want the intelligent, loving, trustworthy, loyal, hardworking partner to be the mother or father to your children and to be your life partner, you need to embody those traits yourself. And if you can't seem to find that person and the people that do embody those traits aren't showing interest back in you, there might be a reason for it that goes beyond just physical appearance or the basics. And you can easily blame other things for this. And they certainly take part in the equation. So I don't want to discount that. But it is such a good way to understand where you sit in life and to see how things are really going for you. Because if everybody's showing interest in you, then that might mean that something's going pretty well. If nobody's showing interest in you, maybe you got to take better care of yourself and try to work on getting higher leverage skills and to work a little bit harder on setting yourself up for a brighter future, because that's really attractive.
I love it. I love it, man. Maybe we should do a second round talking about
Maybe.
this. I think not a lot of people think about the inter and codependencies, but when it comes to business, relationship, personal stuff, personal developments. I think, and I'm totally guilty of that too. Taking business and success head on and thinking that there is if you just solely focus on one area of your life, everything else is going to take care of itself. And in most cases, it's not true. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've just been aware of time, and obviously, I've had a few questions from people, from other agency owners about your new venture and your SaaS business that you've launched. Maybe you can briefly talk about the SaaS business, and most importantly, the transition that you've made from obviously selling the agency business, but maybe the transition in terms of skill set and mindset needed to start and grow the new venture?
So one quick
Mm,
note. I'm good on time, by the way,
yeah.
until noon. So for another 45
Okay.
minutes, if that's helpful.
Cool. Yeah. Let's just
But now
carry on.
now I'll answer the question. The biggest mindset shift in launching a new venture in software, no less, actually ties in really nicely to what it is that we were just talking about as far as auditing yourself and understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at. Because I have no experience in software, I have no experience in tech. It's not something I'm terribly familiar with. I've worked with tech companies specifically on their marketing efforts, but I've never actually had to deal with product and what it looks like to build that and what it looks like to find a good user acquisition strategy and so on and so forth. With that being said, I think that the biggest mindset shift I've had to have is twofold. Is realizing first and foremost, an agency business is a very simple business that scales linearly, which is another way of saying that the more clients you bring on, the more people you need to hire, and it's a talent business like you had said earlier. And the result of that is that it's really difficult to see any level of exponential growth. It's kind of like running on a treadmill instead of seeing hyperbolic growth like you could see with something like media or tech. So that's kind of realization number one. That being said, an agency is like a means to an end, where my goal isn't to run an agency for the next 10 years. It's to run an agency to make enough profit that I can continue to invest into software development, that eventually the software company can become to the main company because it has more leverage than the agency business does and doesn't scale linearly.
Mm. Just to pause you here for a second, what would be your advice to those who run the agencies, run agency business, and are thinking about starting a SaaS business or another venture that has got more leverage than the service-based business? At what point it's a good idea to start thinking about launching, the second venture?
Okay, so keep in mind what we said earlier about
Yeah,
shiny object
yeah.
syndrome, right? Where it can look really sexy to say, I'm going to go into software while I'm running my agency, but chances are good that you might just end up making a mediocre software while running a mediocre agency because your focus is scattered. That's real. That can be a painful realization at that. So you got to be extremely careful. The second thing is you have to recognize that you're probably deficient in your technical skill set. This was a huge mindset thing for me, is recognizing, okay, if I'm going to go into software, I have no technical background, and thus there's a huge deficiency. I have two options. I either hire somebody that can make up for my deficiency as far as the technical skill set goes, but then I'm reliant on them, or I can learn it myself, but it's going to take a lot of time and energy and effort. I decided to kind of take a hybrid approach. I brought on a CTO who is a partner in the business. Unfortunately, we actually just split ways recently. I bought him out from the business. It didn't feel like it was good timing for a variety of reasons that I won't go into. But subsequently, I now have this huge deficiency again in technical skill set and know how. So that's something I need to make up for in talent, or I can learn it myself. I think I'm going to use kind of a hybrid approach where I'm going to continue to try to learn some things myself, but then find somebody who's very capable. Another thing that I think is worth noting is that if the software idea that you have is completely extraneous to the agency that you're running, it is probably a shiny object. However, if there is a way to make the software a reinforcing feedback loop or part of the kind of growth flywheel of your business, then all of a sudden it makes a lot of sense. So, why am I comfortable sitting here saying that I'm going to start a software business at the same time as I'm running an agency when I've just been talking about how distracting it is to launch multiple ventures? It's because the software that we're creating is helping the agency run more productively. Everything that we're developing right now is strictly being used as a suite of internal tools that increase our efficiency and productivity, that make our results better for the clients. And then once we make those tools good enough, we can actually spin it off as its own B2B SaaS product. And that's where it gets really interesting, because now we can pitch it to other agencies that are doing similar things and say, hey, if you want to do what we're doing and you want this tool for your business, because now you can increase the output of your average employee by 2 or 3x. So you're lowering costs and you're increasing your profit. that becomes a really interesting and compelling pitch because we already have it working for us. We're our own case study. So that's how we're using it, is we're creating internal tools first, which is just making the agency business better. And then once those tools are good enough, we can package them as their own product. So that's what I would say should be the objective. If it's not that, then what you're doing is you're starting a separate business. And this goes into shiny object syndrome. And you're going to end up creating a mediocre software while running a mediocre agency because you're not giving either one the level of attention and focus that it needs to be great.
Fascinating. So essentially, the second venture is sort of helping you to go to market with, no, there was another thought that I had. So the go-to-market strategy is basically an incremental development of sort of that product market fit that you have with the SaaS, with the software business, that then reinforces the feedback loop for, through the service they provide with an agency or consultancy. Would that be the right definition of it?
Yeah, in some capacity. Like I can actually break down the specifics if it's helpful.
Yeah,
in terms of how exactly we're doing this.
That'd be interesting.
So my company Engine, which is the business that we're talking about here, we offer personal branding services to primarily B2B companies. If you're an entrepreneur, founder, executive at a B2B company that has an average LTV of a client of around 25K or above, then we generally think we're a pretty good fit and that we can drive or create an ROI positive personal brand for you through podcasting. Now, the reason why we use podcasting is that I believe that it is the best, most versatile format to creating content on every social media platform at large, while also tapping into cross-pollination of audiences where you get your content featured on other people's profiles, which contributes more to your growth, right? There are very few other content formats that can do that other than podcasting. So we build personal brands and we use podcasting as the medium to doing that. Now, on the back end, operationally, what do we actually have to do? Well, we have to help our clients get good podcast guests that fit their ICP or their target audience. We then have to reach out to those people. We then have to book them. And, we can use like a Calendly link that we provide to our clients or something. We then have to help our client prepare questions to actually ask the person that is getting on the podcast. Once the podcast is filmed, we need to edit the long form podcast. We need to cut up the short form videos. We need to write captions for all of the short form videos. We also need to create written content for platforms like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc. So we have all of these different deliverables. Now, with the introduction of generative AI and new AI tools that have existed, copywriting can actually be outsourced in many ways. It's not perfect, right? If you ask ChatGPT, hey, write me a LinkedIn post about what it means to be successful in 2024, you're going to get the most generic, impersonal piece of content you could possibly imagine. And if you post it to LinkedIn, it's going to flop because everybody knows that it's generic, it's impersonal, and it's not a good reflection of who you are and what your brand is. But with some custom prompting and some custom databases, you can actually get ChatGPT to write you a piece of content that is optimized for the LinkedIn platform based off of other examples that you've given it. You can have it match your tone of voice, and you don't have to put any time or energy into actually writing the content because you can upload the transcript from the podcast and say, when Bob talks about this, write a post about that and use his words, paraphrasing what he says, structure it like this, and use one of the hooks from the database. Now, I'm oversimplifying a lot of this, but
right, yeah.
That all of a sudden makes it so that we no longer have to have a dedicated copywriter writing content from scratch. We've developed a software where when we upload the long form podcast to said software, we're getting custom LinkedIn pieces of content. A copywriter will still scan it really quickly just to make some small edits and, change the tone or certain vocab or whatever the case is. But the content is 80% done. So now a copywriter's output isn't they can do 5 posts in a day because each one takes them over an hour or something. Hopefully they're faster than that. But just as an example, instead they can do 15, 20 posts in a day because the content's being written for them. They just have to make a couple of little tweaks and then they send it off to the client for approval. And so we've 4x the output of a single person within the business. And so now our cost of goods sold for that specific line item is significantly lower, which means that we can do a couple of things here. We can either take the extra profit and reinvest it back into the software, which is what we're doing, or we can go ahead and we can lower the cost of the service because it's even more efficient than other agencies and we're more competitive in the marketplace. And so for what somebody else is charging $3,000 for, we can charge $1,500 for, and we make just as much profit as they do. So we're significantly more competitive while getting the same results. Different strategies there. I think it's better to just take the extra profit, reinvest it back into the business. You'll grow even faster. In any case, that's like the practical application. So we're doing this with copywriting. We're going to do the same thing with video editing. We're going to do the same thing, with actual platform distribution. So like if you go to Sprout Social, which is a social media management software, and you schedule a post, it will give you optimized posting times for the platform. And so we can go ahead and eventually create a platform where you upload a long form piece of content. It'll edit the long form podcast for you. It'll create the short form cut downs for you. It'll create the written assets for you. And it'll schedule these for the optimized posting time across different social media platforms. And now so much of the work is done for you. You don't have to touch as much of it. And this is exactly what we're doing manually right now, which is exactly why it's reinforcing itself. All the profit that we make goes into the software. The software makes us more profitable by increasing the amount of output that we, can actually do with the same level of input. We take that additional profit, reinvest it, and so on and so forth. That's the business that we have. And that's why I'm so bullish and excited on it, is that it just makes sense. It's not growing a second business in addition to the main one. It's just taking what we know works. And then eventually, when the time comes, my goal will be to hire a CEO for the agency that can just, take over that arm of the business. And then I'm solely going to be focused on, okay, how do we sell this software product we've built to other agencies so that they can use it either as a new service that they can offer their clients or for their existing service to make themselves more efficient.
Love it. I love the entire approach to this. It resonates with me quite a lot. It also, I think, reemphasizes the importance of asking the question why you are the best founder for this particular business model or for that particular business. And in your case, you are the best founder for this particular business because you've got the track record and experience and expertise to back it up. I think you're absolutely spot on when founders try to split their focus and try to jump in a totally different industry or an unrelated topic that they don't know anything about. They just think that is trendy. And second of all, it helps you to build even more defensibility around the product and the idea itself. Because again, given your experience and expertise, amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, cool. Calvin, I think it's been one of the longest conversations that I've had. Usually I try to aim for like 45 minutes, 50 minutes, but it's been fascinating. And yeah, generally fascinating to listen to your story and to how you've come about from, not going to uni and making it happen in the world of marketing and business. Just to finalize, when it comes to perhaps giving advice, maybe to younger agency owners, especially in their maybe earlier 20s or mid-20s, although it's not my target audience, but I think given your background, is there any type of advice or suggestion that you can give to those who want to start a business, or especially an agency business, but they don't have the industry know-how or experience?
Yes, I'm actually happy that you answered or asked this, because this is something I think about often. As I mentioned earlier, I've done plenty of work for free in my career, and I really believe in that and I stand by that. And I think that a lot of people hear that and then they go to people like Gary Vee or Alex Hormozy or some other big entrepreneur or big business owner, and they say, hey, I want to work for you for free. And I've seen these messages all the time. The problem is that you're not actually asking to work for free. You're saying, hey, can you train me for free? Because I don't know anything yet. And it is not a valuable pitch, because you don't actually know anything yet. You don't have any skills. So why would anybody hire you, even for free, if that means that they're going to have to spend their time training you? And then once you're actually trained, how long are you going to stick around until you leave and you find a job that pays? So that is one of the constant problems that business owners face when it comes to quote unquote working for free. So how do you get the skill set without that? Do things by yourself. That's the easiest way to answer this. In my opinion, the easiest way to get a body of work and experience that is high quality and that will get you in front of the right people and lead to your first client or get your first job is by starting a YouTube channel and doing something. Now, what is that something? Well, maybe you legitimately just want to be a YouTuber. So you're going to force yourself to learn how to edit good videos and make good thumbnails and learn title strategy and what it is that gets people to click and watch a video. That's a valuable skill set. People will hire you for that. So that's a good one. Maybe you don't really care that much about being a YouTuber, but you're going to document your journey of learning how to code and you want to learn Python. And so you begin taking a Python course and then you make YouTube videos of you doing various experiments in Python and you document what it is that you're learning and you make videos doing tutorials of the things that you just learned from the course that you just took. That's a great way of not only learning things and building your personal brand, but it's also a great way of reinforcing your learning because once you teach something to somebody else, that's how you know that you've really solidified it. And so if you make content, teaching people your learnings, that's a great way of doing it. And then once you've done this for like a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long, I promise if you're consistent with it, you will have a great like skill set in front of you. If it's with computer science and coding, you're learning Python or JavaScript or whatever the case is, yeah, just make YouTube videos of you doing that. Teach people different things that you've learned from various online courses and explain it in the way that makes the most sense to you. That will make you significantly more knowledgeable. That'll help you get a job as a programmer. Then you can even send it to potential employers and they can vet your work and they can determine whether or not you actually know what you think you know. So great way to get in front of people in a way that stands out too, because nobody else is really doing that. So that's going to be very different from the average resume that people are seeing. If you want to be a marketer and you want to run an agency, then, make YouTube videos, learn how to edit videos, learn how to do thumbnails and graphics. And after a little while, you will understand what makes a good video. You can show other people your videos and say, hey, if you want me to do for you what I do for myself, then pay me. And they know exactly what they're getting. And then eventually, after you do that with a few people, you can even hire another video editor that's better than you to help you make even better videos for your clients and so on and so forth. So just start and do it for yourself first. Don't try to make a pitch to other people that you're going to work for free because you're not actually asking to work for free. You're asking for free training. Once you have some experience and you've been doing the YouTube channel or something else, then offer to work for free because you can actually point to this body of work that you've been collecting online and you've been documenting it. You can say, hey, look at how much I've learned. Now, if I can help you, here's what I think I can do for you. And I'll do it for free or for very cheap. And then it's actually valuable. And then there are people that will give you a serious look. I only got hired by Gary because I had been doing 5 years worth of work on YouTube prior to getting the job that paid peanuts. So, if it took 5 years of work to get a job that paid very, very little, just imagine how much work it takes to get a job that pays a lot. It takes a lot. And so I would highly, highly, highly recommend just start a YouTube channel, document yourself learning things, doing stuff, editing videos, making graphics, whatever the case is, because you'll get better. You will eventually acquire the skill set that makes you valuable, and then you will get your first clients or your first job opportunity or whatever the case is.
Yeah, it's brilliant advice. Yeah. Lean into learning opportunities rather than money opportunities at the early stages. Eventually, I've heard it somewhere else about that principle, but fundamentally, yeah, if you don't have anything to back up your claims, then money will not follow.
Oh, 100%. It's, here's another tidbit of advice. Like, honestly, the fastest way to make an income, in my opinion, running an agency is go online, look at video editors on Upwork and Fiverr, take videos from their portfolios, and then go onto Instagram or onto Facebook or to LinkedIn or wherever and send cold DMs to various business owners. Hey, do you want me to make videos for you like this? And then when they say, eventually somebody says yes, then take whatever footage they give you and send it to the guy on Fiverr, and you just make the difference in the cost there. That's a quick, dirty way of leveraging somebody else's work, but they're still happy because you're paying them the rate that they're requesting, right? And you're just basically doing biz dev for them, but you get a premium for being the guy managing the business. That's a much faster way to start an agency using contractor or labor arbitrage. I just wouldn't actually recommend it because there's no real foundation there. You don't actually have any skills. You're just bringing in leads, which is totally fine. If you want to be a salesman, go for it. But I think it's much more valuable to actually build a skill set of hard skills and then use that to build the foundation of your career than it is to just leverage somebody else's skills and then immediately start selling them. You can totally do it. If you need to make a buck fast, that's what I would do.
Mm.
But if you're willing to actually invest in your career for longevity, then invest in the skill set first. Invest in learning and not in earning.
I think it's a beautiful final of the episode, and I loved it. Thank you so much, Calvin. It's
Thank
been
you, sir.
brilliant, and it was a pleasure having you.
Hey, likewise, thanks for having me on.